Hi, I'm Darren Starwin, and I love supporting you in claiming your power, the power of love. Today's message is about an odyssey that I went on when I was back in my teenage years to India to study with a spiritual teacher. I think you'll find this interesting and possibly amusing. Every generation has its own opportunities, its own challenges, its own backdrop of history that's going on. And when I was growing up, it was the time of the Vietnam War, the British invasion with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, student riots and student power, hippies and people dropping out of society and taking LSD, going to space, changes all over the world in the political structure, the end of colonialism in Africa, riots in Washington, D.C., marches on Washington, civil rights. So much was going on, and going to the moon in a spaceship. So that's all these changes and big changes in consciousness was going on during my generation. But at a pretty young age, even in my late teenage years, I already felt a little weary and burned out with the world, and I really was looking for some kind of inner or deeper answer. It came to me pretty early looking for that. You might say I had my midlife crisis before I was 20. I grew up in New Jersey on the East Coast, but I was out in Boulder going to college at University of Colorado. And I heard about this teacher who had come there to Boulder, who was coming again. He was a 13-year-old guru, or perfect master. And when I heard about his teachings, I was pretty intrigued. So I saw this young man, and I felt a real connection with him at this auditorium in the student union at my school. And I was able to receive the knowledge he gave, which is a set of inner meditation techniques. And before I knew it, in a short amount of time, I was on a jumbo jet that had been chartered by a group of about 500 American and British young people heading on its way to India for this 2-month trip. We were going to go meet our teacher, who's called Miraji. So anyway, a lot of these young people were people that had been in the drug world, that had been the sort of semi-hippie kind of people, the kind of counterculture people. Some of them had been drug dealers. But they're all kind of getting to that point of wanting to go on to something more real and genuine and kind of move out of that whole life. So we landed in India after this long trip, including going to England on the way. And the first thing that happened is that we were put in these buses and gone from the airport in New Delhi to this huge festival ground. And we were brought up to this giant stage that hundreds of people could sit on. And all 500 of us were sitting cross-legged on this stage. And we looked out, and to our amazement, there was 500,000 people just all the way out to the horizon. And as far as you could see, people. And these people were all disciples or followers of our 13-year-old teacher that we had met in America. It was mind-blowing. And I was thinking, how could this boy come up and deal with this big crowd? But after a while, Miraji came. He got up on the stage in this big chair, microphone in front of him, and he started speaking with this great power and authority. And I was looking, and this whole ocean of people were just in rapt attention, listening to every word he was saying, and I could just feel all this love energy and all this devotional energy just going back and forth, and I'd never seen anything like that. Even the Rolling Stones concert I went to in Asbury Park was nothing like that. So the trip went on from there. At that point, eventually we went on more buses up to northern India to a place called Haridwar, which was an ancient area of many, many temples that had been there for thousands of years. And we moved into Miraji's ashram called Premnagar. And basically at night I would roll out a sleeping bag out on the deck somewhere. We were fed basic Indian food. Instead of plates, they gave us banana leaves to eat on. I remember seeing carrots that had all the colors of the rainbow in it. Lots of three-legged dogs running around who were wild, and monkeys coming trying to take our food. It was a bizarre experience for a kid growing up in New Jersey, believe me. But we meditated every day. We'd come and hear our teachers speak and other people speak, and went through a lot of stuff. I remember when I first sat down and tried to meditate, it was so difficult. I would take one breath in, and then it would seem like maybe a half hour would go by before I'd remember to breathe out consciously. It was like, this is really hard. and I got dysentery, and I felt like my intestines were coming out of my body, and a lot of things were going on. But then after that time at Premnagar, we went all the way across India, like 1,000 miles on this old-fashioned train, and went to another city with another big festival. And one thing that was going on then is that there was a war going on between India and Pakistan at that time, and America was aiding Pakistan. So as you can imagine, Americans weren't all that well thought of at that time. When we had been back at the ashram, they actually told us to turn all the lights out every night, so when all the bombers from Pakistan came over looking for targets, they wouldn't drop bombs on us. When I was in the other city called Patna, all the way across India, there was another giant festival that we were going to go to. And everybody was going in buses, but being kind of the hiker type that I am, me and two other brave guys said, no, we're going to walk. So we walked for about 40 minutes across this unknown town to get to this area. And on the way, this gang of local Indian youth started following us. And more of them started following us. And finally we got to a place where we were surrounded by at least 40 or 50, maybe even more, of these young guys looking at us, and some of them pretty menacingly. I think some of them were just sort of curious, but then some of them were thinking, oh, we heard in the news, this is our enemy, these Americans. So we didn't know what to do and started to get a little scared. And then some older guy from our group, Indian guy, just broke through the group, grabbed us and pulled us out of there before anything bad could happen. So this was the way the trip was. So anyway, after this long odyssey in India, I came back to Boulder, Colorado, and moved into an ashram there, a little farm on Foothills Highway. And we started having these meetings every night called satsang, where we would sit and talk about spiritual things and spiritual discourses. And I said, my mind was still so overactive, so hard for me to meditate. And one thing I really hated was that people kept talking about, you need to surrender yourself to God, surrender yourself to the divine. And I hated it when people talked about surrendering, because I couldn't surrender to save my life. I couldn't make my mind stop. I couldn't open my heart. I wasn't seeing all the beautiful images that other people talked about in their meditation. I felt like I was about as spiritual as a piece of granite in those days. But something just kept me persisting and just keep trying to do this. The thing I hated the most, though, is when they talked about surrender. And so that's how my spiritual odyssey started. And I've got to say, over the months and years that I kept patiently practicing meditation that I was taught by my teacher, it actually started getting better. I started feeling more of this beautiful feeling inside myself more of the time. And I was able to concentrate more. And so it really was so worth it doing that in those days. So thanks for listening to this little story. I hope you find it interesting. And in the next video, I'm going to say a few more things about surrender that I think you'll find quite amusing. A little bit about how I learned to surrender. So I really appreciate your interest and your attention. See you next time.